Hello, everyone. Joe Samaniego here, Grid Live. Welcome to our Grid Live post-race show. Definitely want to thank you for joining us. It's been a fantastic week of racing. Along with me, Kobe Lambis from the Podium Finish. Welcome, Kobe. Been a wonderful weekend of racing. What's your initial thoughts of everything?
Oh wow, so much racing going on this weekend. All the action today over at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the 104th run at the Indianapolis 500. Definitely a lot of action, a lot of things happened during the Indy 500, and then also the Dover double header with NASCAR as well, and then also a thrilling MotoGP finish.
Big thriller MotoGP. We're definitely going to get to that as well as NASCAR. We'll definitely be starting with IndyCar and the Indianapolis 500. And for all our viewers, participate in the chat room. We'd love to hear your questions or comments about the Indy 500 or any of the weekend races, and we'll address them on the air.
Yeah, starting with the 104th run at the Indianapolis 500, 11 rows of three, and an empty house racing behind closed doors, but it was still the greatest spectacle in racing. So as the green dropped, Marco Andretti immediately fell back to fourth as Scott Dixon took the lead. And then shortly after that, we had our first caution as James Davison had a brake failure, which ultimately led to a fire. But James Davison was able to get out of the car unharmed, and just unfortunate last place finish for him. And then, we had the first pit stops, mainly people in the back of the pack tried to get on an alternative strategy. And Joe, if you were a strategist up on the box, what type of advantage do you think stopping early could do for the rest of your race?
So definitely stopping early. The big advantage you had was it put you off the cycle. What we saw at the Indy 500, especially early on, passing seemed to be a lot tricky. We knew the aero screen was going to change the aerodynamics. It looked like it made it to the point where it was harder to pass compared to years prior. With that said, it seemed once you got on a different cycle, off the cycle of the leaders, when they came in to make the pit stops, you were up front. You got the clean air. And depending on how the yellow flags work, you could pick up positions. And it definitely was the case today.
Yeah, and then after that we went green again, and then Marcus Ericsson became the next caution when he crashed, got loose on the outside of turn one and got up into the wall. Very disappointed for Marcus Ericsson because looking really strong in that number 8 Husky Chocolates Honda with Chip Ganassi Racing. And then after that, everybody came to pit road except for those who pitted the first time around. So this cycle, last year's Indy 500 winner Simon Pagenaud and other Chevys up front. Joe, what do you take from this restart?
It was very interesting because we had a lot of questions about the turbulence from the aero screen. And with this restart, we knew that coming into Indianapolis, tire wear is not a big issue. Yeah, some teams did see some more tire wear, but it's not the kind of tire wear where you have to come in to get new tires. You mostly came in because you were running low on fuel. So definitely the track position was becoming more of a factor in the Indianapolis 500 this year. If you could get the clean air, be up front, especially once the first few laps, you were staying up there. It was a lot harder to pass, and it essentially equalized everything after I would say about the first 5 or 6 laps. It became really tricky to pass as everyone got spread out.
And then once Simon Pagenaud and company came to pit road, everything cycled through with Scott Dixon leading once again. Then after that, another crash, third caution. After with Dalton Kellett, after getting in dirty area and slid out of the groove. I believe it also looked like maybe the air off of Ben Hanley's car got him loose. When Hanley came down, like chopped across his nose. It definitely looked like that Dalton Kellett got a little loose there from the air. Really crazy what air does right there. And then we had a restart, and a scary crash on the restart. It was Connor Daly spun out of turn four, and then Oliver Askew. It looks like he kind of got lost in the smoke, and then he crashed hard into the inside wall. Hit the safer barrier, and we definitely saw the barrier do its job. You know what, Joe? What was this like? What was going through your mind when you saw Oliver Askew hit the wall? At that really awkward angle.
That was a very scary hit, and that's not the first time that wall has seen scary hits. In fact, it is that wall, the first wall really to see in major motorsports that had some sort of software wall technology. I can remember, I believe it was 1995 when in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series went there, Kyle Petty hit that wall just about head on after hitting the outside wall with a blown tire and then going nearly head on into that inside wall. That inside wall has always seen some hard hits as cars lose control out of turn four and hit the inside wall. And it's been a while, but definitely having the safer wall technology there definitely prevented more serious injury for Oliver Askew. And I think it was sort of just, especially for fans like myself and others that remember when that was still brand new technology back in the 1990s, when it was, oh, they put in this foam inserts, all the safer technology in that inside wall. It's still doing this job to this day.
Yeah, certainly very lucky to see Oliver Askew walked away. And, it's a true testament to all of the safety innovations over the years because, about 30 years ago, that could have totally been a way different story than how it turned out. So, yeah, obviously, like Askew was a little shaken up after that, but it seems like he's going to be all right. And then after this incident, green flag again. And then it was an exciting battle for the lead with Scott Dixon and Alexander Rossi swapping the lead back and forth, back and forth. But they had to say feel as well. So, it can be kind of difficult to do that. But it was certainly really fun for the fans watching the two leaders swap lead back and forth. And then we had another caution when Alex Palou got loose and hit the wall, and then coming to in the pits, Alexander Rossi came to pit road along with all the others, and then as Rossi exited the pits, he clipped the side of Takuma Sato's car, and he was given a penalty for an unsafe release. Did you agree with this penalty, Joe? I saw some people on Twitter. It was like a mixed bag. Some people saying, yeah, that was that was a good penalty, and others said no, that doesn't make any sense to send him to the back of the field.
I'm very mixed on that penalty. I know the rules say the penalty is essentially for an unsafe release. If you were going by that, the unsafe release, it would sound like it's definitely on the team for them to release the driver safely. However, in the case, we saw Rossi, the way he was coming out and with Sato's position, there's nothing Rossi could have done. It would have been all on the team. So if you were looking at the rules, interpret it as it's the team's responsibility to safely release the driver, you will say it's a fair penalty. If you feel more it was on the driver, then you probably wouldn't agree with it because Sato, as they were mentioning, he was right on the inside. He could have fallen behind the second McLaren car, but didn't, and was still in that slow lane. So very questionable call by the IndyCars and a very tough call.
And then after this, we had yet another restart where Scott Dixon quickly took the lead from his Chip Ganassi Racing teammate Felix Rosenqvist, who stayed out during that pit sequence. And then Alexander Rossi, he went big on the restart. I'm sure that's going to be a part of the highlight reel for years to come. I remember a few years ago, Angry Rossi driving from driving through the field. I believe it might have been 2000. Yeah, it was 2018 when it was he put his fist out the window like this at Oriol Servia. He was really mad and making some real bold moves on the outside. In the year they said it was really tough to pass, and Rossi got sent to the back, and Rossi, I believe he passed like 5 cars in one corner today on the restart. It was really crazy, driving really hard, but unfortunately Rossi ran into trouble when he crashed into the wall and ended up retiring from the race. Do you think if Rossi had not been handled the penalty, do you think he would have been involved in this accident today?
If he didn't get the penalty, he would have continued on and finished the race. Where exactly, we don't know. Definitely within the top 3 because he was one of the best cars out there. And Alexander Rossi even said in the post-race interview, had he not had that penalty, it would have been up front with the cleaner air. It's just one of those parts of racing, though. You get a penalty, you got to work your way to the front. He was making that progress, but with that dirty air, pushing it really hard, just got loose into the wall, race over, and that's just part of racing.
Yeah, you're right. Just a part of racing. And then after this, had another restart. But I mean, most everybody could have made it to the end. Scott Dixon was leading, but then Takuma Sato, no attack, no chance. Took the fight to Dixon and ended up taking the lead. At this point of the race, the sun was going down, more of the track was in shade. It was setting up to be a close finish as Takuma Sato, Scott Dixon, and Graham Rahal were navigating their way through all the lap traffic and stuff. And then the last caution of the race arrived. 5 laps ago, Spencer Pigot had that scary accident, on the front stretch, hitting the wall that's at the at the entrance of pit road that separates the track from pit road. Really scary accident. And the leaders were off turn 4, and took the 4 to go for the race. And a lot of people actually thought that this race was going to, get red flagged and we see a sprint to the finish. But, unfortunately, we just ran out of time. And Takuma Sato ended up winning the 104th Indianapolis 500 under caution. This is the second Indy 500 win. Now looking at the top 10, Sato at the top there. Scott Dixon, who dominated this race, finished second. Might be a little disappointed, but it looks like it might be game over for his competitors in the championship fight, because Scott Dixon has a massive lead. They had Graham Rahal in third, two Team RLL cars on the podium, good for Bobby Rahal's organization. Santino Ferrucci fourth, Joseph Newgarden fifth. Paddle Ward, the top rookie, finished sixth, and then James Hinchcliffe seventh, Colton Herta eighth, Jack Harvey ninth, and Ryan Hunter-Reay rounds out your top 10. And Joe, overall, what do you think of the race in general?
Overall, I thought it was a really good Indianapolis 500. Sort of reminds me of some of the races where we've seen the long green flag runs. We saw fuel strategy come into play. That's when Rossi and Scott Dixon were really mixing it up. So it's a little bit of everything for the true race fan that really enjoys the different strategies, the different. I mean, we had cars off cycle that pitted early. So we always had some sort of passing going on. The undercut wasn't as powerful as, like, for example, Formula One, where the undercut could almost guarantee you positions gain on certain tracks. Here, it wasn't that powerful, but we did see it be used to gain positions here and there. And overall, I thought it was a really good race. I would say probably for me, especially in the last 10 years, I would think it would definitely be within the top 5.
Yeah, I really thought the race was very, very entertaining. I mean, the first part, there was a lot. There were some, big hits to the wall. They were like really crazy hits. But overall, I thought the race, had plenty of action. Scott Dixon, really dominated early on. Looks like that nobody could beat Scott Dixon, and then all of a sudden, like Takuma Sato's car, finally was able to take the fight to Dixon, and then Sato was just out front at the right time. And I bet if the Spencer Pigot crash didn't happen and we stayed green to the finish, it definitely would have been one of them classic finishes that we'd be talking about for years when we talk about some of the most memorable finishes with the Indy 500. And now looking at two drivers who we thought were gonna play a big factor in the storylines today, but weren't a factor in the race today, were Marco Andretti, who started on the pole, and then he just fell back, and he never sniffed the front at all during this race. And then Fernando Alonso, who basically run towards mid pack all the day and ended up finishing 21st. Were you surprised that we didn't see more today from Marco Andretti and Fernando Alonso?
Yes, especially Marco, fast all month. We know carburetor day, he was about 13th fastest, I believe, or maybe a little slower. But a lot of times we think, okay, they're just trying out different things, learning about the car. They're not pushing it. Today, okay, he didn't lead the first lap. I thought, well, he's taking it easy. We got 500 miles to go. Doesn't need to lead the first lap. But then throughout the rest of the day, he just slowly was losing positions. The pit stops, he lost a couple positions in each pit stop. It just seemed like that team just didn't really have something for Scott Dixon, for the Ray Hall Letterman team, for Team Penske even, and they just kept falling back to their 13th place finish. So for me, that was a little bit of surprise because Andretti Autosports, they're always one of the best teams when it comes to Indianapolis 500, and today they just did not seem like their teammates looked really good, but it just seemed like Marco Andretti team just did not have what it took to win today.
Yeah, yeah, I really thought, since 2020 has been this crazy year, I said, why not Marco Andretti break the Andretti curse and be competitive? But I know in the previous program we were thinking that Carb Day, that performance, it wasn't gonna be a big deal at all. But it turns out that maybe we should have paid attention to, him being down on the speed charts at Carb Day, because it just wasn't a good performance today from Marco Andretti. Definitely thought that he would have been and could, would have definitely had one of the better cars today. But it seemed like that whatever issues they had on Carb Day, they didn't get it turned around, and it just ended up, not, the Andretti curse is just gonna live on. And then Fernando Alonso, I didn't really think that, that his car was as good as his teammates' car, Askew and Pato Award. But I thought Alonso would have been a little bit more competitive today, but he posted to Twitter and he seemed pretty happy with the outcome. He's probably not going to be here for the next 2 years, and it's going to be interesting to see if we'll see Fernando Alonso try to complete the Triple Crown someday. And we'll definitely talk more about the Indy 500 later on in our program tonight.
Yeah, a lot more about the Indianapolis 500. Definitely gotta agree with you, especially about Fernando Alonso. His performance today is gonna be really interesting to see. One of the big things we saw, of course, this weekend, NASCAR. They had the doubleheader at Dover, Delaware, the Monster Mile. Started off yesterday. Denny Hamlin. We talked about on Saturday morning how he hadn't won the track. Well, he proved us all. He went out there and he took the win. He tied Kevin Harvick for the most wins in the season. The big surprise and the big story for a lot of people was Jimmy Johnson. He got in the top 16 yesterday in the points after William Byron. He was just off the pace. A little bit of surprise. Chad announced he has won there all the time with Jimmy Johnson. A lot of people anticipate William Byron to come in, do really well at Dover, but they were just off the pace, finished behind the 20th place position. Kurt Busch, he had a lot of bad luck early on in the race, and on the backstretch, got tapped by Alex Bowman and was sent into the inside wall really hard. Early on in the race, fell way in the back. He was still in the top 16, but he definitely had a big impact in his point championship hopes. Now, when it comes to Saturday's race, what were some of the big surprises for you, Kobe?
Well, actually thinking about it now, there's two surprises. One was Jimmy Johnson getting into the top 16 points after race one at Dover, because I was thinking when we were playing our NASCAR in and out during the pre-race program, I was thinking, no, Jimmy Johnson's gonna be out, but him being in, that was a surprise, and it was also really surprising that William Byron in the 2014, they just did not have the speed at all yesterday. So that was definitely one of the more surprising things. And one last thing, I thought yesterday was Martin Truex Jr.'s race to win, but lap the traffic seemed to play a big factor in allowing Denny Hamlin to catch him yesterday. And I don't think Martin Truex Jr. he really wasn't happy with how Eric Almirola raced him at the end of that race yesterday.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up about how he was unhappy with Eric Almirola. Of course, Eric trying to stay within the top 16 and trying to stay within the position he is in to clinch a playoff spot for the championship. We'll definitely be getting more into Sunday's race at Dover, but definitely one of the big races that occurred on Sunday as well. And one of the most talked about finish was the Styrian Grand Prix for MotoGP. Of course, this was the site last week of the Austrian Grand Prix where Zarco and Morbidelli had their horrific crash. Zarco did race today, but he was not a factor at all, finished 14th. Paul Espargaro, he started on the pole in his KTM, but it was Joan Miller taking the lead into Suzuki, and he even had up to about a 2-second lead. But then with 13 laps to go, for the second week in a row, another red flag, another race restarted. Maverick Vinales, brake failed. And on this front stretch, he had to jump off his bike at 125 miles per hour. His bike continued on, hardly slowing down because there's no brakes, just goes right into the soft wall and goes up in flames. Red flag comes out. He is done for the day. Now, one of the unique things about MotoGP in the red flag, teams are allowed to change their tires, and several teams did so. So Joan Mir, who was the leader of the race, lost it to Jack Miller and Paul Espargaro, and those two battle out for the win. But then on the final lap, as those two were battling, we saw Miguel Oliveira slowly catching up in his KTM for Tech 3. And sure enough, final lap, final corner, Jack Miller, Paul Espargaro, side by side, but from third place, Miguel Oliveira sneaks past both of them to take his first career win in MotoGP and gives Tech 3 their first win in 20 years. Now, Dovizioso, he got 5th place. Quartararo, he got 13th place. So Quartararo still has the lead in the MotoGP point standings by only 3 points over the Ducati driver. So definitely without Marc Marquez there, we're seeing a lot of different winners, a lot of excitement in MotoGP. But of course, as the grid ranking will show later tonight once it's released, for the first time in the history of the grid ranking, we have no MotoGP rider in the top 10. That is pretty big considering this is the 4th year of the grid ranking, but definitely was one of the more exciting events of Sunday.
Yeah, and another thing that's also pretty big is that Mark Marquez, he probably won't be back for another 2 months after that, after the surgery from his injured arm. And it's gonna be interesting. Are we gonna continue, seeing all of this parity in MotoGP? Because before, Mark Marquez, he was the top dog, and moving forward, that was a really crazy finish today. And and a lot of young riders, can take advantage of Marquez's absence and hopefully, shoot into the spotlight and become one of the star riders for years to come, like become the next Mark Marquez. But I'm sure once Mark Marquez is healthy enough to return to riding, he's going to be very hungry to get back out there and show everybody why he's still the best out there. And now shifting back to Indy 500 coverage. In Takuma Sato's post-race conference with the media, he said that he's still amazed, that he is a two-time Indy 500 champion now, and he never thought that he would have this opportunity. And also said, in regards to his age, since Takuma Sato's in his 40s now, people wondering, hey, you're a two-time Indy 500 champion. You don't have anything else to prove. They say you're getting to the age now where you can just walk away, and you've solidified your career. But Takuma, age really isn't a factor to him, and he wants to, race for as long as he like to, and he just thinks that age is just a number. And also one of the big discussions online on social media was about the last caution when Spencer Pigot brought out the yellow, and then it was a big crash on the front stretch as I mentioned a little while ago, and then people thought that the red flag would come out, in order for us to see a green flag finish. Joe, do you think the IndyCar could have thrown the red flag here, or did they make the right call, by just ending another caution?
I feel that they did the right call by ending it under caution. One of the big things, the only time the red flag came out to ensure a green flag finish at the Indianapolis 500 was 2014, but that left us with a 7-lap shootout. Some of the big differences between an IndyCar and a NASCAR is with a NASCAR, the drivers, they could start their cars by pushing a button. If the button doesn't work, they could have a tow vehicle push them. With Indy cars, when they have a red flag, they have to be in pit road. So one of the big things was when the yellow flag came out, it was 5 laps to go. The leaders were entering turn 4 when the yellow came out, the caution for Spencer Pigot. So they crossed the line to make it 4 laps to go. If they were to come into pit road to take the red flag, remember where the start finish line is. The leader would already started the 3 laps ago. So that would have realistically left them only 2 laps, assuming they just get out of pit road, do not even a complete lap, just essentially out of turn 2, the backstretch, 3, 4, take the green flag. It only left them with a 2-lap shootout. There was just not enough laps for them to complete the race under green flag, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was to me, obviously you definitely after what was going on there between Sato and Dixon, fighting through lap traffic. We thought it was gonna be, a shootout for the Indy 500. Get the cameras ready because like Scott Dixon was coming on Sato, and we're gonna see what an unbelievable finish was coming up, and then the caution flew, and I felt like a lot of fans were very disappointed that we couldn't finish the race under green flag conditions. But at the same time, I also believe, that the Indy 500, it needs to be the Indy 500, not like the Indy 505 or the Indy 510. Yeah, yeah, I really wish, that the conditions that worked out might have, if we had like a few more laps, you know, like if we had a few more laps under regular conditions, and then the caution came out, maybe like if we had a caution with 10 laps to go, then maybe we could have got a green flag finish. But it is what it is. There's nothing we can really do about it. And I really wish we could have seen the race end under green, but it just didn't work out this time. And I also have a bad feeling, in these open wheel cars, if we had red flag the race and like did a 2-lap shootout or whatever, especially with drivers going big on these restarts, I think safety might be a real concern because I think that we might have a car like go in the fence or something, and that's something I definitely don't want to see, especially since we had that shootout on the last lap at the Daytona 500 and see what happened with Ryan Newman.
Definitely, yeah, that's something we don't want to see. Now, one of the big things, of course, IndyCar did release a statement. Is IndyCar makes an effort to end races under green, but in the case following the assessment of the incident, there were too few laps remaining to gather the field behind the pace car, issue a red flag, and then restart for a green flag finish. Now, that was, of course, the IndyCar statement from today's after the race, which occurred during the post-race conferences with Takuma Sato.
Yeah, the Indy 500 has always been such a unique event, but especially with especially with IndyCar trying to attract new fans, and with them and a lot of the fans that who typically don't watch IndyCar were on social media, saying that that they desired a green flag finish, and I saw a lot of this from the NASCAR audience because every in NASCAR with finishing a race under a caution, is very unacceptable to a lot of the fan base. Do you think the IndyCar should consider a rule where there's a green flag finish, even overtime like NASCAR, or do you think that we need to let tradition stay traditional?
That is a really tough question. I know when it comes to Indianapolis 500, there's so much tradition at that event. And I think people would not like to see Indianapolis 500 become the Indianapolis 504, the Indianapolis 510, these overtime rules. The way I see it, it's very similar to, we had a really good race. It was coming down to a duel and ended under yellow. I feel it's no different than, having a close competitive sport where it was very close, but then at the end, you have one team just breaking out a big lead and not ensuring an exciting finish, not ensuring an exciting overtime. It's just part of the sport. And the big thing I feel, especially the difference between an IndyCar, open wheel car versus a stock car, NASCAR. Stock car, NASCAR, overtime, Bristol, Martinsville, they could beat them bang and keep going forward. With these open wheel cars, as soon as two wheels touch, somebody's going airborne, and then we have serious trouble.
Yeah, we already saw some, frightening crashes today, and I feel like a two-lap shootout that could have definitely led to an even more frightening accident with the car potentially flying in the air and going into the fence. And with these open wheel cars, they can go flying pretty easily, more so than a stock car. And I feel like yeah, it's disappointing that we didn't get the finish that we thought we were gonna get. Yeah, I wish we could have ended under green, but at the same time, you also have to consider the safety element as well. And it just wasn't in the cards this year for a green flag finish. It's unfortunate, but the finish that's basically what this year 2020 has been like.
Yeah, 2020 has been something else. Not exactly the most spectacular finish, but definitely it was a spectacular race. We'll talk a little bit more about the Indianapolis 500 just a little bit. First, want to hit up on the Australian Supercar Series. They had a triple header at the Darwin circuit. It's not the Triple Crown. It's just so happened to be another weekend with three races. And Scott McLaughlin, he treated it like a Triple Crown because he went out there and he swept all three races, including one race from the pole, and just dominated the event. We can't confirm Scott McLaughlin. He has taken the grid ranking lead again. I know last week we talked about how Scott Dixon was most likely to do that, and Scott McLaughlin had to do something spectacular, and he came out spectacular this weekend. He's going to definitely inherit the grid ranking lead. The grid ranking will be released later tonight following our program as well.
Yeah, now switching over to today's NASCAR race at Dover, which just finished up a little while ago. Chase Elliott is in the playoffs, but he was out early after suffering heavy contact in an incident between Joey Logano and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And then when you fast forward to the very end, Jimmy Johnson's crew chief Cliff Daniels made a call late in the race coming down pit road and only getting two tires to put Jimmy Johnson out front. As Jimmy Johnson's trying to secure a spot in the playoffs, but Jimmy wasn't able to hold off the most dominant driver of the day, Kevin Harvick, who got around him to win number 7 of the season. And Kevin Harvick also clinched the regular season championship. And Eric Almirola, Kyle Busch, and Kurt Busch locked themselves into the playoffs. And speaking of the playoff bubble is going to be very intense heading into Daytona next week. It's going to be, very unpredictable. And we have Matt DiBenedetto 9 points above the cut line. And then you got William Byron only 4 points in, Jimmy Johnson 4 points out, and then Eric Jones and down. Everybody else must win, or they're definitely not going to be a part of the playoffs. So we're going to Daytona, super speedway race and pack race, and a lot of pushing and shoving. The big one, some spectacular moments. It's going to be really crazy. Who do you think Daytona is going to favor, or is it just going to be a matter of luck and less skill?
Daytona is going to be crazy for those three. I mean, Daytona, the restrictor plate, so many people could win that race. As you said, Larry McReynolds If the car could crank, you could win it. Big thing for especially Jimmy Johnson, have a clean race. William Byron, have a clean race. All of them. The big thing, stay out of the big one. If you stay out of the big one, you got a shot at winning it. It's so unpredictable with those three, especially. All three of them are in winning equipment, so any one of them could win. I definitely see it's going to come down to who has the better pit stops, who does the better execution, because all three of them are capable of winning that race. Not just because of the restrictor plate nature of the track, but just because they have championship caliber equipment. So it's going to be really unpredictable, and I just can't pick a favorite between those three.
Yeah, I think anything can happen at Daytona. I think that whatever their final destiny is, coming up into the playoffs, anything is possible. These drivers, they're like there's like nothing you can really do here. Just be out if it's the last lap, be out front and hoping and hope if there's a crash behind you that you're up front and then the caution flag flies and you're the winner because well, I would not want to be, Matt DiBenedetto and down heading into Daytona because it's like, oh gosh, yeah, I could be running 12th and get taken out in a big crash and then my playoff hopes are over. It feels like that luck is going to play a big factor in who is in the top 16 after Daytona.
Yeah, definitely luck's going to play a big factor. And it's been interesting. We've seen Matt DiBenedetto go from in and out from, oh, he's safe, we don't have to talk about him, to now he's definitely going to be in next week's in and out. He might be out just the way things have been working. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see how everything turns out. Now, one of the big things, of course, the Indianapolis 500 was the big race of the day. We do have one person who is tuning in ask who won Indy. Takuma Sato. Takuma Sato, two-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. Definitely a big congratulations to Takuma Sato as well. I know we had the opportunity to interview him during media day. This was the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. That is in the books. The books will also show Scott Dixon led the most laps but didn't get the win. Marco Andretti, the pole sitter, a lot of people thought this was the year. He didn't finish in the top 10. He got 13th place. Fernando Alonso, the Triple Crown, 21st place. When it comes to Marco Andretti, Fernando Alonso, they had a lot of the headlines. Who do you think is feeling more disappointed after today's race?
I think it definitely has to be Marco Andretti. I remember when the NBC cameras were on in pre-race, Marco was just eating a sandwich, looking chill. Typically, Marco looks really nervous, before the race. But this time around, Marco, it seemed like he was just chill, like, hey, it is what it is. Today's gonna be a great day, and everything's gonna go well. But it just wasn't the day for Marco Andretti. And I know this has been a running joke here. They say, is it finally gonna be Marco's year? And I actually thought, since it's been such a hard year, that it would actually be Marco's year, but guess what? It is not Marco's year. He's going to have to hope that 2021 is finally going to be his year.
Yeah, not his year, not the Andretti's year. The Andretti curse, as many people say, continues on. One of the teams that probably felt cursed this year was any team that had that bow tie. Chevrolet were just not the fastest at all this month. We saw Honda dominate essentially the entire month of August. They mostly got up front because of a combination of strategy, going off the cycle, pitting early. That's when we saw Simon Pagenaud up front. Once things equalized with strategy, Simon Pagenaud was further in the back, and of course he had contact and fell further back. Patricia O'Ward was essentially one of the big surprises from Chevrolet. Do you saw any chance that Chevrolet was going to win today, or do you think it was just all going to be Honda for the entire race?
Well, honestly, I didn't really have a preference between the manufacturers, Honda or Chevrolet. I actually thought things were a lot closer today in terms of power with Chevrolet and Honda. But it seemed like that Honda, was just a little bit better than Chevrolet. But yeah, those Hondas were really stout. Scott Dixon ding had the Ray Hall cars up there. Yeah, it was definitely a really successful month of August for Honda.
Very successful month for Honda indeed. When it comes to earlier today in our pre-race show, we essentially broke down the field in different groups. From the rookies, we saw three of them got wrecked. One of them, Rinus VK, pit lane mistake, got a penalty. That sort of took him out of contention. So Patricia O'Ward was the highest finishing rookie. When it came to the sophomores, Santino Ferrucci, fourth place finish. Great effort for him. And Graham Rahal out of the racers full time that have not won the Indy 500, highest finishing, and James Hinchcliffe for the non full timers was the highest finishing. When it comes to the drivers I have mentioned, Rahal, Hinchcliffe, Santino, and O'Ward, who's the most promising, do you feel, for a potential Indy 500 win? And who do you think is probably the most happy about today's effort?
Well, actually, I think Santino Ferrucci might have one, a lot of future success in the Indy 500, IndyCar in general. Ferrucci really drove like a veteran out there today. Made some bold moves. Like just, I mean, not necessarily like last year, but Ferrucci was up there, and I feel like if some things that played out differently, he might have been in the mix for the win this year. But I believe as the years go on, that Santino Ferrucci is eventually going to start winning IndyCar races, and maybe he'll add the Indy 500 to his resume.
Yeah, definitely. It seems once he breaks into the win column, I think there's a lot of potential. Santino showing a lot of promise. And then, of course, Patricia O'Ward, really great run at Road America. I think he definitely has a bright future, especially once we get out of the super speedways and Chevrolet's horsepower disadvantage seems to be equalized.
Yeah, certainly. There's a lot of young talent in the IndyCar series right now, and I'm sure over the years we'll get a lot of more young talent as well. So when the Scott Dixons, and the Will Powers decide to walk away from racing, the series will be in good hands with a lot of great talent. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of success for many years to come. And unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight, and we want to thank you for supporting us here at the Grid Network. Appreciate our 77 subscribers now on YouTube. Yeah, please subscribe. Visit our website, gridranking.com. And on Wednesday night, be sure to check out Grid Tonight as we analyze the latest news in the motorsports world. And on Friday, we're gonna have episode 2 for Life on the Grid. It's gonna be motorsports journalist Darius Goodman, and with music from Jacob Harbor. And also make sure you follow us on all of our other social media platforms at Grid Ranking on Twitter and the Grid Network Facebook page. Yeah, and if you want to help us grow more and provide more content, please feel free to visit our Patreon. And if you're unable to support us that way, please share everything about the Grid Network with your friends. And for Joe Samniego, I'm Kobe Lambert from the PodiumFinish.net, and we want to thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week.